Everything you ever wanted to know about Prop 19 coming up next with David Wolfe. Hi, this is Pat Kapowich, Kapowich on Real Estate, a program dedicated to consumer protection within the residential real estate arena. We have a great guest here today, David Wolfe. David, welcome.
Pat, thank you so much.
Listen, I was referred to you because of your vast background in lawmaking circles, and especially with this Proposition 19.
Yeah, no, Pat, thank you. And I mean, just by way of background, I have been a lobbyist and a consultant for 15 years, representing my own company, Well Versed Consulting, and today representing the Yes on Prop 19 campaign, which is on the November ballot.
Beautiful. Okay, now if you could give a quick overview, and then we're going to do a little bit of a history, and we'll go back to the finer points. What do we have?
On Prop 19. So Prop 19 basically expands property tax portability for seniors, people with disabilities, and victims of natural disasters. So right now, just real briefly, in current law, you can transfer your property tax base if you're over the age of 55 to one county. You can only do it one time. You can only do it in the county in which you live in or one of 10 other counties throughout the state. And it has to be to a home of equal or lesser value. Prop 19 would expand those portability provisions to allow you to move to any home anywhere in California, and you can do it a maximum of 3 times. Tremendous flexibility, again, for seniors, people with disabilities, and those who have lost their homes, especially in recent natural disasters and wildfires. Just real briefly too, Prop 19 also narrows the current inherited transfer provision to where parents can transfer primary residences to their children, but the children need to live in the home and claim it as their primary residence in order to continue to receive the tax base.
Okay, perfect. That's a great segue. Now, we go back. This is the first major law coming down the pike here in 40 years, right? Because we had Prop 13 in 1978.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's been, so I can go back and talk about Prop 13. So Prop 13 passed in 1978, and that did 2 things. It capped your property taxes at 1% of the price at which you bought your home or business, and then increased it by an inflation-adjusted factor of no more than 2% a year. And it also established a 2/3 vote for any tax increases approved either by the legislature or local special taxes or parcel taxes also required a 2/3 vote with Prop 13.
Okay. And then 1986, we had 2 laws, right? Prop 13, Prop 58. Prop 58 with the parent to child.
Yeah, in 86, Prop 58 came about, and I want to stress that that and Prop 13 are not in the same code section. You know, there's nothing about Prop 19 that's currently on today's ballot that negatively impacts Prop 13 in any way. But yeah, you're right. Prop 58 was passed in 1986, and that did set up the current inherited transfer provisions, whereby parents could transfer a primary residence to their child. The child didn't have to live in the home or even in the state. And then they could also transfer up to $1 million of additional property to their children.
Fantastic. Now, Prop 60 was taking your property tax base with you, selling out of the big 2-story or the 4-bedroom home.
Yeah, so Prop 60, which also passed in the 80s, allowed you to transfer, if you're over the age of 55, your Prop 13 base value to a home of equal or lesser value. You can do it one time, either in the county in which you live or to one of 10 other counties. And yeah, it had to be to a home of equal or lesser value. And that's one of the things Prop 19 on the November ballot amends.
Okay. Now the Prop 90 that came along in 1988, that was to move it to any of the counties in California, or was that limited to 10 or 11?
Yeah, so I'm sorry. So Prop 60 allowed you to transfer your base within your same county, but it had to be to a home of equal or lesser value. Prop 90 expanded that and gave counties the option, if they so chose, to pass an ordinance to allow seniors to transfer their tax base into their county. And there were originally 16 counties that opted into it, and today there's 10 counties that allow the transfer.
Right, because when I was a new realtor in 1988, we had all these flyers with which counties would allow a transfer, and it filled the page.
Right,
Now it's down to a handful, right?
right,
Yeah. Okay, now, so 1998, we had the grandparents and the grandchildren.
right.
That's Prop
So
193. What was that
yeah,
about?
so in essence, that expanded, these portability provisions still further, allowing grandparents to transfer homes to their grandkids, just as parents can transfer homes to their kids.
Beautiful. Okay, now, let's skip ahead here. We go to 2018,
Mhm.
Proposition 5, which I believe you could take your property tax base anytime, anywhere, any place within California.
Yeah, so the property tax transfer provisions in Prop 19 and Prop 5 are very similar in the sense that, yes, Pat, you're correct. In both initiatives, you could transfer your Prop 13 tax base to any home anywhere in California. There are some differences. Prop 5 back in 2018 that you referenced, which by the way, voters did defeat because of massive costs to local government, which we can touch on shortly if you'd like.
Sure. Yes.
But Prop 5 failed basically 60 to 40 back in 2018, just to establish that context. There are a number of differences, though, between Prop 5 and Prop 19. And I think the key ones are Prop 5 did not include the ability to allow individuals who had lost their homes due to wildfire or natural disasters to transfer their property tax base anywhere in the state. That was not included in Prop 5. It is included in Prop 19. Prop 5 also allowed for an unlimited number of property tax transfers for seniors and people with disabilities. Prop 5 limits that to only 3, which I think makes a lot of sense. And it's going to make things a little bit easier on the county assessors too.
You mean
And
Prop 19? Prop 19 limits to 3.
Prop 19 caps it at 3. That's correct. Prop 5 was unlimited, so I think that's an improvement. And also, Prop 19 forces individuals to claim the homeowner's exemption when they move and basically fill out paperwork with the assessor's office, letting them know that the transfer has occurred. And that was not in Prop 5. So there's an additional step that seniors need to go through when they take advantage of these portability provisions. And I think that extra paperwork is going to provide a lot of accountability. And I think that's good too.
Okay. Now let's skip ahead to 19. We have you on here.
Yep.
You spent a lot of time. What arguments in favor of Prop 19?
Yeah, I think there's many arguments in favor of it. I mean, let's just start with the portability aspect of it. Really, and when I say portability, I mean the ability to allow seniors and people with disabilities and wildfire victims to transfer their property tax to any home anywhere in California. The flexibility of it is, I think, just wonderful. People ask all the time, why 3? How could a senior possibly move 3 times, when they hit their golden years? And I tell people, hey, you can move when you're 55, when you're eligible. And then let's say you encounter some health issues when you're in your 70s and you need to move to a more accessible home. So you can do that. And then, when you're 80, your friends and family move out of the area and you want to move to be closer to them, and you can do that. So, and all of a sudden you're right up to 3 moves. I think what's egregious right now under current law is forcing seniors who maybe move when they're 55 or 60 to have to live in the same house for 20, 30 years because, and they're retired, they're on a fixed income, and they know if they move out, they're going to have to pay market value property taxes under current law. And Prop 19 alleviates that from being an issue. So the flexibility for seniors and people with disabilities, and the disability angle, Pat, I should mention this too. I have a disability, I have cerebral palsy, and I'm a homeowner. The disability aspect of this applies regardless of age. So if there's individuals with a disability who are in their 30s, who are homeowners, and they're struggling and they need to move to a more accessible home, they can do that 3 times, as they age and perhaps encounter some physical difficulties. So, I mean, the value for literally 8.6 million seniors over the age of 60, never mind tens of thousands of homeowners with disabilities, never mind the 26,000 wildfire victims who have lost their homes in the last 3 years, is, I think, tremendous.
Sure. Now, another item is they are claiming it'll free up tens of thousands of homes
Yeah.
per year.
Yeah, so the measure I think does create housing churn, Pat, and I think that's going to be of great benefit not only to seniors who, as I mentioned right now, are really trapped in their homes in a lot of ways, especially if they've moved once and can't move again. So as they downsize or as they shift geographic locations in ways that they can't do under current law, that is going to open up some housing stock for young families who are in these starter homes to move into bigger homes, or for millennials and Gen Z to finally be able to crack the American dream and become homeowners. I think it's incredibly important.
Now, this Prop 19 will generate over $1 billion a year for local communities. What's that about?
Yeah, so first of all, Pat, no, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I strongly question, the opponents are running around saying that, hey, this is $1 billion tax hike. And I just want to stress that that's not correct. And I mean, not only is it not $1 billion tax hike, I dispute that it's even a tax in the first place. The Nonpartisan Legislative Analyst's Office, in their analysis of the ballot measure, they don't call it $1 billion tax hike, nor is it listed in the measure itself. What Prop 19 does do, and this speaks to the intergenerational transfer provision that I talked about earlier, which is the other half of this initiative, whereby, again, when children inherit their parents' properties or property, their primary residence, they need to live in it and claim the homeowner's exemption in order to continue to receive the low Prop 13 tax base that their parents had. Otherwise, the property is reassessed to market value. And I think what's important here is that Prop 19 eliminates unfair tax loopholes exploited by a lot of people who are wealthy non-California residents in order to avoid paying their fair share of property taxes. And Pat, where I get that from is, listen, there are 60% of these parent-to-child transfers where the child does not live in the home or claim it as their primary residence. 60%, the large majority of these transfers. And we found through our own internal research that the large majority of these 60% don't even live in the state. So I think the question is, why are we giving tax breaks to out-of-state residents when instead we can recoup some of that revenue and designate it, and this is another part of the initiative, to wildfire prevention. There's tens of millions of dollars in this initiative that are going to go to 500 county and rural underfunded fire departments to help battle wildfires and engage in fire prevention. And you need only look out your window to understand how important that is. Right?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there.
Sorry, I delved in there on that too much, Pat. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. That's why I have you on the show. I heard a lot about you, and you're a brilliant young man with a lot of background here. By the way, you were with the Harvest. Your background, didn't you do 12 years?
Yeah, it was actually close to 14 years at Howard Jarvis as their legislative director.
Wow. Okay, so we have the right person on here to discuss this. You talked about out-of-state. If you could just touch about out-of-state firms that buy up California homes. What does that mean, that loophole that you were speaking about?
Yeah, well, so I mean, I think I think this happens a lot, right? There's out-of-state individuals, and I mean, the classic example was one recently brought up in the LA Times, where Lloyd and Jeff Bridges, inherited their parents' home in Malibu, and they don't live in California, but they're renting it out right now and paying, I mean, literally $14,000 of property taxes a year, on what's a, $10, $12 million home. And, again, that doesn't seem fair. That doesn't seem right. And the reason why I say that is if you go back and look at the original intent of Prop 58, if you go back and look at the voter information guide in 1986, the measure made it very clear that the child was supposed to live in the home and claim it as their primary residence. That was always the intent. But like I said, that's not what's happening if 60% of these kids don't live in the parents' home. So all Prop 19 does is simply restore that original intent.
Okay, that's the speaker. So it was an intent, but it didn't actually make it into the law. what I was referring to also, that's a famous case with the Bridges family, but the East Coast investors.
Yeah,
Yeah, so those are firms that gather funds together and buy rentals.
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and that is common. Again, those East Coast investors coming in and doing that. Yeah, that happens a lot here in California.
Especially on the downturn.
Oh, for sure. I mean, 2008, we saw that happen a bunch.
Right, they were buying them up left and right.
Yep.
Okay. Now, you also spoke about getting reassessed. So those East Coast firms that bought hundreds or thousands of rentals, they will be reassessed. How is that reassessment take? What's the math on that?
Yeah, so the math on that it's a good question, Pat. And so it's this: the child, upon the transfer of the primary residence, has 1 year under Prop 19 to determine whether or not he or she wants to live in the house. And if that doesn't happen, or if an East Coast investment shop comes in and purchases the house, after 1 year, it's going to be reassessed. The home's going to be reassessed to market value.
Right. So they have 12 months to decide if they're going to move in or not.
Correct.
And then fill that out.
And they can still inherit the home and obviously continue to own it, but there's going to be tax consequences after 1 year if they decide not to live in it.
Yeah. Now speak about do the math after that 1 year. So on month 13, how does it play out for the family that's in Nebraska?
Yeah. So if the child decides to not move in the home, the property is reassessed to market value.
Okay. Now, part of the arguments was this is one of the best tools that parents have to give their children.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I mean, I don't dispute that, but you got to remember too, Pat, California is the only state of the 49 states that has something like this. And, again, I think California tax policy should benefit Californians. And it's not if there's out-of-state residents who are getting a property tax break, when in turn we can, again, use that money to fund fire prevention and spend tens of millions of dollars to help serve and support literally 500 underfunded fire departments, county and rural fire departments that haven't received adjustments in their funding formulas for 40 years.
Okay, that's a good point. You mentioned 60% of the inherited property. So we know that by where the mailing address is, right?
Among other things, yeah, that's correct. We can also sort of gauge it based on who claims the homeowner's exemption too.
Okay. Now, Prop 19 takes away Proposition 58, even though it was approved by 75% of the voters.
Yeah. No, and this is, Pat, the opposition brings this up all the time. And I mean, let me just say this. The youngest voters, and talking about undoing what the voters did in 1986, the youngest voters who voted for Prop 58 are now 52 years old. And that means at least half of current registered voters have never had an opportunity to weigh in on intergenerational transfers. And listen, it's time 36 years later for them to draw their own conclusions, look at what Prop 58 said, look at what the intent was, and reach their own conclusions.
Well, I have the right man on the show here for these rebuttals, David. There's another argument that with the mom and pop rentals, that when the grandparents pass away and the kids inherit it, and there's been renters in there tenants in there for 10, 20 years, artificially low rent. And then now they're out. They got to go market rent. Probably if the house sells, they have to move, or if the rent, the property tax increase is brought down to those long-term renters. Follow me? So they've been in the house. We see this all the time. I see it all the time as a realtor, that a lot of these mom and pops don't raise the rent.
Yeah.
Every other year, and then maybe just a 2 or 3%.
Yeah, so I think Pat, I think it's important to mention with some of these investment properties, that are not a primary residence. Let's say you own a $5 million apartment complex, right? Under current law, 4 million of that $5 million complex is already reassessed to market value upon the death of a parent who's transferring it to their child. So all Prop 19 does is just take that additional $1 million and say, that also is going to be subject to market value taxation. That's a $10,000 a year property tax hit. And I'm not going to say that's not insignificant, but I don't think, renters are going to be unduly harmed by this initiative. And I would just stress too, just the community aspect of this too, in terms of keeping homes and families, keeping families together, keeping families in communities, and those families are going to benefit and communities are going to benefit also, because they get hundreds of millions of dollars a year of additional property tax revenue that they can spend on things like affordable housing and creating additional rental opportunities. So it's a give and take,
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's I have the right man on the show to hit these. Now, let's talk about if you could just a timely topic here, fire response fund.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that issue?
Absolutely. So 75% of the revenue generated as a result of Prop 19 goes to fire prevention. So, I mean, just, how that works, that those 60% of properties that I talked about earlier that are going to get reassessed to market value, that creates additional property tax revenue for local government. And that's going to provide additional funding for schools too. That means the state has to kick down less money to fund schools because the counties are taking care of it due to the increased property tax revenue. And, as a result of that money, 75% of it is going to get kicked to, fire protection and funding in those 500 rural fire districts that I talked about earlier.
Now, that fire response fund, is that new? Is that going to be created or is that existing right now?
Yeah, no. So that's a new fund that's created in Prop 19. It's entirely new money. This is tens of millions of dollars a year that didn't exist for these county and rural fire departments before. And like I said earlier, those funding formulas haven't been updated in 40 years. And the definition of underfunded is already in state statute. And let me tell you, these are districts that could really use the funding.
Right. So we have 58 counties in California?
That's correct. Yeah. And there's, I think 48 of the 58 counties have fire districts that will directly benefit from this funding.
Okay. Now, speak about when the families that have lost their homes due to fire.
Yeah, no, and Pat, this is tragic. And I'm sure if you and your listeners out there are watching TV, you've seen some of our ads with individuals who have lost their homes. And this is just tragic. Like I said, 26,000 individuals and families have lost their homes over the last 3 years. And, unfortunately and sadly, that number continues to grow by the day. And under current law, listen, you can transfer your tax base after you've lost your home, but you can only do it to one of 13 counties. And a lot of the 13 counties that allow the transfer for natural disaster victims are in areas that are also in high fire danger. So the ability to be able to restart your life anywhere in the state with any home is tremendous. And I think it's going to be of great value to wildfire survivors.
Now, we see in terms of opponents for this, that the increased taxes will lower the property values.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's true at all. Again, you're keeping communities together, you're increasing housing churn, you're increasing housing stock. Again, as seniors and everyone are able to move around into homes that best fit their needs, you might find that home values actually decrease over time because people aren't actually stuck in their homes. So it's hard to gauge how consumer behavior is going to look like on this, but we know it's going to help the 8.6 million seniors over the age of 60 that live in California right now.
Okay, because the opponents also talk about there's going to be an increase in rent to the
Yeah.
tenant. So the rebuttal
No,
to
I
that.
mean, yeah, no, I don't, listen, it's not about rent. It's about increasing the housing stock. And let me just give you an example. My parents live, and I know we're running short on time, but my parents live in a Del Webb, okay? And, maybe as seniors are able to move around to different homes, Del Webb gets excited and starts to build additional communities. And maybe there's some seniors who are renting, homes or condos or something like that who are just like, hey, I want to live out on a golf course. I can afford to do it. And so maybe I'll move up and buy a house. I don't think this destroys the rental market. And it could provide additional stock.
Okay, when you speak about additional stock, 1 minute left, is the communities might be able to fund more affordable housing?
Yeah, and that's true as a result of the hundreds of millions of dollars counties are going to get as a result of Prop 19 passing. They can spend that money however they want, including building more affordable housing.
What is, in closing here, what's the feeling out there?
The feeling out there is very good, Pat. Our polling looks excellent. We think we're going to, clearly be able to pass at this point with 3 weeks to go. Let me just give our website real quick for those that want more information. It's yeson19.vote.
Now, in closing, we have the LAO, or what's the acronym? Legislative.
No, thanks, Pat, for that question. I throw out all these acronyms and forget to tell people what they are. The LAO is the Legislative Analyst's Office, and that's the nonpartisan group that advises the legislature on various things. And they also write the fiscal analyses that are in your ballot pamphlet that people are looking at right now.
Okay. David, you've been a fantastic source. Really appreciate your time today. I look forward to speaking to you in the future, especially in mid-November.
Pat, I'd be happy to come back on if that's what you'd like. And I really enjoyed spending the time with you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Great. Thanks again. It's David Wolfe. I'm Pat Kapowich. Thanks again for watching. This is Kapowich on Real Estate, a program dedicated to consumer protection in the residential real estate arena. Take care.